Today we have with us a remarkable guest, someone who has dedicated nearly 38 years of his life serving our great country. His name is Major General Mick McGuire. Now, he has done everything from navigating aerial combat over Iraq to negotiating with state and federal legislators. He has a proven track record of leading diverse teams through challenging situations, a great advocate for American exceptionalism, secure borders, the Second Amendment, upholding the Constitution, and of course, the well-being of our nation's veterans. Major General McGuire, it's such a pleasure to have you joining me today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, for having me, and happy Veterans Day to all my brothers and sisters in arms out there.
That's right. Today is Veterans Day, and I want to start out by first thanking you for your service. AMAC appreciates our veterans, young and old, throughout our nation, because we know without them and people like you, sir, America just wouldn't exist today. But we see what's happening today, and there's such a growing concern among our AMAC members about military preparedness and indeed their focus of our current military. And we're seeing a drop in recruitment as well as people who are being discharged for refusing to get the COVID jab. How concerned should Americans be about our military readiness, and what are some of the top issues that you think are impacting our current military?
Well, thank you so much. In the last 90 days, I retired and spent 18 months or 14 months now, 3 months post-primary, running as a Republican primary candidate here for the U.S. Senate, and people asked why I was doing it. And I think the message that most resonated is that, to me, the greatest threat to the Republic, Rebecca, is the Republic. And the vanguards of that Republic are our great military members currently serving, and that lineage of veterans that ties all the way back to the unity of our country on Armistice Day in 1919, and us celebrating that for 100 years now. What you're talking about is an evolution of what I see happening on the radical left to destroy our military this way. In 2018, it was about abolishing ICE. In 2020, it was about defunding in police. In 2022, they have moved into the military with this idea of compulsory obedience, where we are willing to literally push people out of the formation for a failure to take a vaccine that's experimental in a group that has less than 175 deaths in 2 years out of 1.7 million people, and risk readiness, as you said, for recruitment and the sustainment of the force across the spectrum. I'm hearing from my brothers and sisters in arms, they're concerned about this. And it's one of the reasons we have to take to task the policymakers and those in the Department of Defense that are using the military, coupled with a bad economy, to force people into positions where they're sacrificing their the moral virtue that they stand on. And our military has never been founded on compulsory obedience. It's about esprit de corps, morale, and a shared sense of values as we all take an oath to defend the Constitution.
Yeah, and it's that shared sense of values that is so important, and we really see what's happening with wokeism being sort of, pushed throughout our military. That really is shocking to me. That, for example, that they're saying, we ought to allow people who are transgender to undergo surgery on taxpayer. At the cost to the taxpayer. Yeah. There's all kinds of crazy things that we see here. And I think that we need to remind ourselves that it was only, 50 years ago that the percentage of members of Congress who had served in our military was over 70%. And today that's only around 17%. I mean, right. It's really just something we used to never consider someone to be a president who had never served, right? And that was created by our first general and president, George Washington. So I do pray that we are able to do all that is right for our brave men and women that stand up to fight for this great country. Now, you're one of our nation's foremost experts on the state of our nation's border security and the terrible situation that we're facing as a result of unchecked immigration and open borders. And you're seeing it every day as a native Arizonan. You've dealt with this operationally as the Adjutant General of the Arizona National Guard, and you also called for major consequences for Mayorkas. You've recently written about border security and sovereignty in national media. So my question, sir, is what should a newly empowered Congress do on this set of issues? Should border security oversight be a top policy concern for the 118th Congress when they settle in?
Absolutely. Absolutely. All the things we talked about with like defunding police and lawlessness is tied to the idea that the media and the left has long said that immigration policy is border security. It isn't. Border security is separate and distinct from immigration policy, and it has to be maintained for the sovereignty of this nation. If we begin to turn a blind eye to the lawlessness at the border, the human trafficking, the sex trafficking, the drugs pouring across, the fact that we have no commitment from the commander-in-chief right now, who I said on the campaign was derelict in his duty, Joe Biden, in turning a blind eye to certain laws. It's just not a matter of if, but when the rule of law is undercut across the country. You've seen it in places like San Francisco and Chicago, where you have looting and the rest of these things. All of that is tied to this idea that once you start walking away from enforcing the rule of law, no law is safe. And the thing that separates us and makes us the greatest country in the history of the world, and you said I'm a fourth generation Arizonan. My family has been in a border state for almost 100 years. The only difference between us and Mexico is not the quality of our character or the moral virtue. It's the rule of law. That is the only thing that separates us from Mexico. And that border and the border wall needs to be completed because physical barriers work. And I've had people on the campaign trail, well, you're heartless. I say, really? When I was the commanding general of the Guard, you mentioned my past. Every single summer for 8 summers straight, we sent a Black Hawk helicopter out in the middle of the summer to pick up human remains of people that were crossing in areas where there was no border wall and the environment is so austere, they thought they could walk to freedom, and they died in the desert. Just think about having that barrier up and creating choke points and the way that would help control and mitigate that human loss. And there's nothing heartless about the idea of having a secure southwestern border and safe communities. And that's why we're going to win, going forward. This is a winning issue across independents, Republicans, and everybody other than the radical left. And when someone challenges you on your show and says we're not for open borders, ask them this: why did Joe Biden on midnight, January 20th, 2021, defund 1,080 of my subordinates that were deployed to the southwest border? He zeroed out the funding overnight, and I came in and had to recall all those soldiers that were supporting Customs Border Protection, ICE, and Immigration Services.
Yeah, it's an answer that we're just not getting that answer. They don't want to address it. They don't want to discuss what's happening. That is the Biden administration. They have not been down there to visit it. And they really want to convince the American public that there is no issue. But here are the real numbers. Over 335 million people roughly live in the United States, with over 14 million illegals that are currently residing here in the U.S. And what I find really odd is that our resources seem to be aiding illegals over our veterans. Let me give you an example. We've got, on any given night, over 40,000 veterans who are homeless. Now, over the course of a year, approximately twice that many, 80,000 or more, may experience homelessness. Only 7% of the general population can claim veteran status, yet our veterans represent over 13% of our homeless adult population. In other words, I think that we're not paying attention as a nation to the people that we ought to be really, giving our resources and our attention to. That is our great veterans, the great men and women who have sacrificed their lives for America, for freedom. And instead, we seem to be prioritizing illegals. How do we reverse this?
Well, you're right. When I was on the campaign trail, people would talk to me about the fact that we have homeless veterans here in Phoenix, Arizona, on the streets, and we are leasing hotels in Scottsdale, Arizona, to provide 72 hours of housing for for those that are here illegally and then give them a voucher and move them out to wherever they say they would like to go. That is a gross abuse of the authority of the executive branch. That is why I think Mayorkas needs to be impeached. And I will tell you that it's clear to me that that is a failure by the Democrats to advance a policy that's so obviously counter to the American values that those fine men and women took an oath at some point in their life as they understood that faith, family, duty paradigm. Now they're homeless and we're not there for them. There's a lot of reasons for that. You know, we can do a whole separate podcast about mental health, about post-traumatic stress, traumatic brain injury, and the rest in our veteran community. But the first step is making sure that they know that the country loves them and cares about them. And if you treat them this way, that's not going to happen.
Very well said. That is so important. We here at AMAC, we love our veterans. My grandfather served in World War II in the Korean War. My father was a Air Force veteran, and it's just you grow up having a special appreciation when you've got family members who are just so selfless and are willing to make huge sacrifices in order to help preserve not just their own generation but future generations. So thank you for saying that. And I love your perspective on the world and on America and really all of the issues that we're facing here. You've got decades-long experience as a military leader, so there's no question that we are facing so many challenges here, so many that are affecting our national security, our way of life. We see inflation, we see what's happening in China and Iran. So many threats, global crime and terror. In your opinion, sir, what do you see as the biggest crisis that this country faces, today and into the next year or two? And are we prepared to face it and make the tough choices to address these threats?
I still think the greatest risk to this country is ourselves. I know there are a lot of existential threats out there, but everything can be fixed, Rebecca, with great leadership. This country right now is lacking great leaders at every level across the spectrum. It's why I ran. I unapologetically told the voters, I am the most proven, trusted, confident leader to provide one level of leadership, at least in this case, in the U.S. Senate. At the presidential level, at the gubernatorial level, across the enterprise, at the business leadership level. You know, you talked early in the podcast about this idea of indoctrinating our forces with wokeism. My biggest fear about that is not necessarily the transgender issue. We talk about the compulsory obedience and the vaccination. It's the idea that we begin to walk away from the U.S. military being first and foremost a merit-based system that blind to skin color, religious preference, gender, or any of the rest. We line you up in formation, and the best of the best is who we're going to select to be Navy SEALs, to be fighter pilots, to be infantry, battalion commanders, to be special forces members, to be cyber warriors, to be astronauts, to do all of those things. If we walk away from that and begin to use immutable characteristics as our reason for creating defense of this nation, we are less safe and we will be more vulnerable. And the young people today are concerned that the leaders, this is again failed leadership, General Milley and the rest, they don't understand the corrosive effect this is having on the formation. And that goes back to what I said. The greatest threat to ourselves is ourselves. We cannot let the greatest military in the greatest country in the history of the world come apart at the seams because of someone's social experiment or advancement of their idea.
You know, General, you said it right when you mentioned leadership and people. It is all about the people. It's all about good leadership. And we saw what happened with this great red wave. And we've got to be prepared for 2024. We've got to be thinking about who do we want as our commander-in-chief in 2024. And let's look at what he's doing now. Is he doing a good job by our military? Is he abandoning his responsibilities when he turns his back entirely on the American people, leaving a wide open southern border that is only inviting drug traffickers, human traffickers, fentanyl in our schools? Our children are at great risk. Our families here in America are at great risk. And the only thing I think that can really fix that is leadership. And it is so critical and so key. So we thank you so much, because you are a great leader, and you're certainly reminding us all how important this is. I want to end with one final question for you, General. I want to talk about hope for America's future. Today, our nation needs it, really more than ever, and veterans more than ever, to stand. They've got to stand. We all have to stand, speak up, and defend our Constitution. How hopeful are you for America's future and for the future of our remarkable men and women who are serving our great nation?
I'm very hopeful. You mentioned a red wave. Here's what I'll tell you. I every day would tell people it's about faith, family, and duty. Freedom doesn't protect itself, and each of us has a duty to participate. Go out and vote, get involved in your local community, vet the leaders, go through competitive primary processes, and find the best leader at every level, from school board to President of the United States. I told my soldiers all the time, an army without hope is a defeated army. We are not a defeated army. This country is the greatest country in the history of the world. Unapologetically, I will tell you, after the U.S. Constitution, or after the Bible, there is no more divinely inspired document than our great U.S. Constitution. And as a strict Antonin Scalia constitutionalist, it's worth defending. We've got young men and women willing to do it, but we have to participate in our duty to support them. Vote, get involved, and have your voice be heard. And this country can do anything.
Well said, Major General Mick McGuire. What a pleasure having you here with me today, because your dedication to preserving our great country and your advocacy for all veterans is exactly why people like you are better for America. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you, and thank you so much to AMAC and all the organizations out there that support our conservative causes. This is no longer left versus right. This is right versus wrong, and we're on the side of right.
Amen. Happy Veterans Day, sir. Thank you so much for your service. And to all of those watching, don't forget to go to amacfoundation.org or check us out on social at AMAC Foundation, because we've got a ton of free resources and information that may help you or any veteran that you know. You can also sign up or donate or volunteer to help the veterans in your local communities and throughout the nation. With that, I thank you all so much for tuning in. And if you've enjoyed this episode, go ahead and listen to more just like it. Head to our YouTube channel or visit us at bfapodcast.us. You can also listen to us on YouTube, Spotify, or by downloading our free AMAC News app. And don't forget to follow us wherever you are on social media. Until next time, I'm Rebecca Weber. This is your podcast, Better for America. Thank you for being here. God bless you. Have a wonderful evening. Happy Veterans Day.